Okay, so have you ever felt like you're really putting in the work? Like you've got this clear picture of what you want, but somehow things just aren't quite lining up. Like there's this kind of invisible barrier between like your efforts and your goals.
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually experience that feeling of sort of pushing against something that they can't really see. It's like they're following all the steps, but the recipe just isn't working the way it should.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the deal with that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's actually what made us want to take this deep dive into this piece we've been looking at because it really tackles this frustration head on and it lands on this concept that might initially sound a bit, well, intense, I guess, sacrifice,
Yeah.
and how that plays a role in creating the reality you want.
Sacrifice, yeah.
Yeah.
The word that comes with a lot of baggage,
Yeah.
connotations of loss, hardship.
Yeah.
Usually people immediately think of it as giving something up, and usually it's something they really value.
For sure, for sure. But this piece kind of flips that script on its head. And it comes from someone who's obviously been wrestling with this same universal puzzle that we all deal with.
Hmm.
How to make real lasting change. And in that struggle, they seem to have stumbled on some really counterintuitive insights.
Someone who's been in the thick of it, really experimenting and observing why some things work while others just totally fizzle out.
Exactly. So that's really our mission today, to unpack this whole idea of sacrifice, really dig beneath the surface of all those assumptions we have about it and try to understand it as this fundamental mechanism for change. We're going to explore this concept of what the author calls cosmic bartering, which is a really interesting way to put it. And we'll try to see how we can engage with that in a way that feels empowering and not like we're just, constantly depriving ourselves.
It's really all about addressing that desire. So many of you shared with us about how to bridge that gap, the space between where you are now and where you want to be. We felt this deep dive could offer a really unique lens to look at that challenge through.
I think so too. Okay, so let's just jump right in. This whole idea of sacrifice as a form of exchange is where the author starts. They talk about how they used to see sacrifice as, this huge dramatic gesture, like something out of an epic movie or, at least giving up chocolate for a month or something. So what did they come to understand it as?
The core insight here is something like a universal law. Nothing comes from nothing. There's always an energetic exchange happening. And it reframes sacrifice not as this punishment, but as this principle of cosmic bartering. So you can't expect to receive something amazing without offering something in return. It challenges that get something for nothing mentality.
It's true, right? It's like the universe isn't running some kind of free giveaway program. And what I found really interesting is that the author points out this isn't some new age philosophy or anything. Ancient civilizations across the globe seem to understand this intuitively. This idea of offering something to get a desired outcome was woven into so many rituals and belief systems.
It's really striking when you think about it. This isn't some new fad. Ancient cultures seem to instinctively understand you sow before you reap in all aspects of life. Think about the offerings they'd make from harvests or even precious objects. There's this deep understanding of reciprocity that spans time and cultures.
It makes you wonder, right, why we might have lost that perspective in modern times. The author suggests that maybe it's because we've gotten a bit too used to instant gratification, and we just assume we can manifest our dreams with sheer willpower and positive thinking.
That's a really key point. While positive affirmations and visualization can be great tools for focusing your intent, the author makes the case that they often miss that crucial element of exchange. It's the difference between wishing for something and actually putting in the work or making tangible changes to make it happen. They use this analogy of a tough love grandma, which I thought was pretty funny. But it illustrates the point. There are underlying requirements for getting what you want.
Totally. It's not enough to just want, you have to be willing to do what it takes. So this leads us to what the author calls the universal rule of no free lunches. Can you break that down for us in this context?
It boils down to this. Anything truly valuable requires some kind of investment or contribution from us. They bring up some really compelling examples from the natural world, like the relationship between pollinators and flowers, the way our atmosphere maintains balance through this constant exchange of gases, even the way our own bodies are constantly renewing cells. It's all about this give and take.
And I think one of the most impactful examples for me was when the author talks about their own experience of unknowingly making exchanges. They realized they were giving their attention, their mental energy, to things that weren't really serving them, like endless scrolling on social media or getting caught up in unproductive online debates. It makes you stop and think, where am I putting my energy?
Absolutely. And what are you getting in return for that? It pushes you to evaluate what you're paying with your most precious resources, your time, your focus. Are those expenditures aligned with what you actually actually want to achieve. They use a really powerful comparison about how if bees vanished, entire ecosystems could collapse, which emphasizes just how critical this principle of exchange is on every level.
Yeah, that's heavy. So if this principle of exchange is everywhere, what exactly is the currency the universe deals in, according to the author? They have some really interesting ideas that go beyond just our physical effort.
This part is where things get really interesting. It's a shift from thinking about tangible resources to more subtle forms of energy. The author suggests three main elements that function as the universe's currency: your focused attention, the emotions you generate, and your emotionally charged thoughts. These are the energies we're constantly putting out into the world.
So it's like we're always making some kind of transaction, whether we're aware of it or not. That argument you had with your family member wasn't just an unpleasant moment. It was an exchange with you paid with your inner peace in exchange for a surge of frustration.
That's exactly it. And the author highlights that the quality and the direction of our attention, the types of emotions that dominate our experience, and the focus of our recurring thoughts, these essentially create the energetic frequency that we're emitting. And this frequency has a huge influence on the reality we experience. If we're constantly dwelling on negative things and feeding those unproductive patterns, that's what we're going to get back.
Which brings us to a section with a pretty dramatic title, but one that's really insightful. Who's Gotta Go? Sounds a bit intense, but what's the core message here?
This is where things get really personal and transformative with this idea of sacrifice. The author argues that to truly create a different reality, the old self has to be let go of. And by that, they mean that version of ourselves that clings to limiting beliefs, those ingrained bad habits, and the comfort of procrastination. It's not about a literal ending, but an intentional dissolving of old patterns and ways of being.
And what's so relatable is that the author's really honest about their own struggles with this, acknowledging how comfortable those familiar ruts can be, even when you know they're not taking you where you want to go. That resistance to change is so universal, I think.
It is. It's human nature to gravitate toward what's familiar, even if it's holding us back. The analogy of the caterpillar turning into a butterfly is perfect here. The caterpillar literally has to cease to exist for the butterfly to emerge. Our old selves, with all our limitations, need to make way for the person we're becoming in order to achieve our dreams.
The piece also talks about why the word sacrifice itself has such a negative connotation for us today, suggesting that we've been conditioned to only see it as loss and deprivation instead of a necessary step towards growth and gain.
That's such an important point. They reframe sacrifice as a way of trading up, as consciously ditching the junk for the gold, and the gold being the things that nourish us and help us reach our goals. The way they compare it to a caterpillar not lamenting the loss of its cocoon is a beautiful way to illustrate that shift in perspective. It's a necessary shedding for something much greater.
So if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, this makes sense, but where do I even begin? How can they engage in this art of sacrifice without feeling overwhelmed by it? The author offers some practical steps.
The first thing they emphasize is getting really clear on what you want. Not just vague wishes, but specific, well-defined goals. This gives you a target to aim for, and it helps you identify exactly which habits or thought patterns you need to let go of.
Because if you don't know where you're going, it's almost impossible to figure out what's taking you off course, right?
Exactly. Clarity is key. The second step is to actively visualize the version of yourself who has already achieved those goals. What do they do every day? What's their mindset like? Where is their attention focused? This creates a powerful vision to pull you forward.
And then comes the hard part, the actual sacrifice in action, making those conscious choices to say no to the old unproductive habits and choosing the thoughts and behaviors that align with your future self. The author specifically talks about those moments of temptation where you want to slip back into old patterns and making the deliberate choice to redirect your energy.
That consistent moment-to-moment effort is crucial. It's not usually about one grand gesture of sacrifice, but the accumulation of those small daily choices to redirect your attention, to manage your emotional responses, and to guide your thoughts. The author's analogy of their old self putting up a fight really resonates with how hard it can be to break old habits. It requires real effort and persistence.
And they frame it almost like a test from the universe, a way to see how committed you really are to the change you want. If you can navigate those moments of resistance, it shows you're serious, and that's when you start to see the rewards.
Yeah, I like that perspective. Seeing those internal struggles not as failures, but as challenges to overcome can be incredibly motivating. And the author's personal story of seeing positive shifts, both big and small, really reinforces the idea that this process of conscious exchange actually works.
So to sum it up for our listeners today, this deep dive into sacrifice has revealed that it's not about some kind of cosmic punishment, but fundamentally it's about exchange. It's about consciously trading your old self and your outdated habits for the potential of a much more fulfilling reality.
The piece really hammers home that there are no free lunches when it comes to real lasting change.
Hmm.
The kind of change you're looking for requires an investment, whether that's your time, your attention, or letting go of those old patterns that aren't serving you anymore.
And the currency we're using in this exchange isn't money or possessions, but our focused attention, the quality of our emotions, and the dominant themes of our thoughts. These are the tools we're all using, whether we realize it or not, to shape our experience every day.
It's about recognizing that that old self, with its limitations and ingrained behaviors, often needs to step aside so that your desired future self can emerge. And this process of letting go, while it can be challenging, is ultimately incredibly rewarding.
And remember the key takeaway here. This isn't about deprivation. It's about a strategic trading up. It's about making the conscious choice to release the things that are holding you back in exchange for the reality you want. Think back to that image of the caterpillar going into the cocoon, shedding its old form to become a butterfly.
That brings us to a really important question for you to reflect on now. Considering everything we've talked about today, about sacrifice, what parts of your old self might you need to intentionally release to create space for that new reality to take root? And what's one small but significant change you could make today? One shift in your attention or a habit you could start to change to begin that process? Maybe even take a moment to look at how you're spending your time or the thoughts that dominate your mind. What are you paying for with the results you're currently experiencing? And does that exchange truly align with what you want?